Welcome to the iPhoneography podcast. I'm Greg McMillan, and I am joined by my two cohorts, Dave and Dwight. Hey, fellas.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing?
We're doing well. So tonight we're going to talk about focal lengths, the focal lengths of the iPhone camera system. So, no third-party apps or nothing involved in this discussion because the focal lengths are what they are. So, when the 14 Pro came out, Apple said in their keynote that there was basically, I think it was at that time, 7 cameras in your pocket. It's like having 7 lenses in your pocket. So you had the ultra wide, then you had the main, or the fusion as they call it now, then the 2X, then actually before the 2X, there was a 1.3 and a 1.5 times, I think it was, and then the 2X, and then the 3X. It was crazy. And, so we're going to talk about, kind of the differences between some of these. And, one thing we're not going to talk about is the front-facing camera, because it's a selfie cam. I mean, we don't really use it for our photography so much, unless you're taking a picture of yourself, obviously. But so we're just going to concentrate on the rear-facing cameras, and this will apply to the Pro as well as the non-Pro cameras. In a lot of these cases, the three of us have Pro cameras, but the non-Pro cameras have the ultra wide and the wide, or the main cameras. So, a lot of the stuff will be pertinent there too. So,
Greg, before you move on,
yep,
because the selfie cam does have a setting where it can, at least on the newer phones, expand out and give you a wider field of view.
Yeah.
And that will affect, and that kind of affects your depth of field a little bit. I don't know if it's direct focal length, and also I know the newest of the new allow you to automatically rotate.
Yeah.
Or to rotate, or have it automatically rotate,
right.
Which some people, I don't want to say serious photography, but still a lot of people like to use the selfie cam to get reactions from things.
Yeah, that's true.
Like when Artemis launched and someone took a picture of their reaction to the launch. And a lot of people were like, oh, you're always taking pictures of yourself. And she said, someone told me there's going to be tons of pictures of the launch itself. But years later, there won't be any pictures of you being at the launch. Especially with the newest, now admittedly, I think it's for video only, the front and back at the same time. But you can use shortcuts to take front and back photos at the same time if you don't have the newest. And that way you can get, a shot of what's happening in front of you and a reaction shot, or, a front and back shot. So it's still worth to think about. You really can't, like I said, it's such a wide field of view in order to get as many people. And so that's also why the front camera makes your face look completely different. The selfie cam makes your face completely different from the rear camera. But it's still something to think about in terms of, when you're setting up a shot. I mean, not necessarily, like I said, you really can't make choices per se, but still, if you're trying to tell a story or give people experience about being at an event, if you follow me, you can see after every race, I take a selfie shot with basically me after I finished, with the finish line in the background.
Yeah.
So
I guess to your point, then there will be some of this that will be relevant to that camera, especially if that camera in your device can switch from, this angle to this angle. A lot of, like, sometimes they'll have an option to, like in the later ones, I'm not sure how far back it goes, but you could switch from, just fitting yourself into getting a group shot. I believe the 17 Pros do it automatically. If it senses faces coming in, to the scene, then it'll actually widen itself out. But I think with the 16 and maybe the 15, I'm not sure. I rarely use the selfie camera, so I'm kind of guessing here a little bit, but you can switch between the normal wide view and then a little wider view. So that, that kind of thought process or method, I guess you could say, what we're going to talk about can kind of, translate, I guess you could say, over to the front facing camera in that respect. So yeah, it's a good thing that you brought that up, because again, I hardly ever use it, and it just wasn't on my mind when I was, thinking about stuff like this. So
Hey, you guys left me in the dust. I don't do selfies. I try not to, but I think the camera's getting better though.
yeah, oh, I think it's definitely getting better. Yeah, forgive me, I just saw this from Devo. What is the best camera / location to take pics of the moon? I would say it would be from the Artemis Orion capsule. That would be the best place.
Mm-hmm.
And
Because
not the selfie cam.
no, not the selfie
No,
cam.
not the selfie cam. But here's the crazy thing. I think I posted this to the group, but it's all over the internet today on April 20th. There was a video taken by Commander Weisner from his iPhone using the 8x zoom of Earthset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was incredible.
And now, admittedly, it took a little bit to focus because it's going through very, very thick glass, which we hope they have very, very thick glass up there. But the clarity of the Earth and how they were able to pick up the moon's surface, and it's not this stark white surface. They even said that in person. They said you look at it from Earth and it's just this stark white, but once you're up there, it's a brown surface.
Yeah,
And it's kind of amazing what the details that you can get. Admittedly, okay, so you had to do a moon mission instead of using whatever Samsung does to get a good picture of the moon. But it's a real picture of the moon. It's not AI.
yeah, yeah. It's really something to see. If you haven't seen it, folks, look it up. Look for it on the group. It's really, really cool how they were able to capture that. So what we've done is we had a little homework assignment over the weekend, and what we've done is we've taken pictures to illustrate the differences between these focal lengths and how it shows in the images. And so, Dwight, you started with the ultra wide compared, so we did a lot of comparisons to the 1X, like the main camera, which is probably the most commonly used camera on the iPhone. So Dwight, you did a comparison between the main camera and the ultra wide, and so this is your first result here that we're going to show. We're going to show two from you, and so just tell folks what you experienced when you did this.
Yeah, but I'll preface it a little bit. My intention here was not only to, show the difference between the two lenses, but it was also to try to capture the emotion of the shot and the intent of the shot. Greg, we talked a little bit before going live on this thing that, I've historically just been kind of a technical shooter where, I'm just looking at composition. I think you're going to mention Jack Hollingsworth video series later on, but I
Yeah.
do have to reference the fact that I watched a few episodes of that, and he's kind of come at it with a little more of an artistic standpoint. So, almost like emotion first, along with light. So my intention for these were not only to depict the two lenses, but also capture the emotion of the scene. So, in this particular case, the 1X lens, and sorry for that glare on the car behind, but that's kind of beside the point what I'm trying to do here.
Yeah, these are not going to be like portfolio pieces by any means. These are just illustrator points.
Yeah, I just cropped and straightened, that kind of thing. But when I got close to this real old jail cell back in the 1800s, I'm trying to 1890. Anyway, this was the jail cell they used in San Juan Capistrano back in those days. And what I noticed was, the mottled light coming through the bars was really cool for a 1X shot. So I said, you know what? I'm going to take that. So I took that shot, and then I knew I had to compare it to the ultra wide. So I kicked into the ultra wide and look at the additional light that I brought in there with this.
Mm-hmm.
That particular sun is not blown out. I did bring it in to make sure it wasn't. But look at all the light that's come through there. I mean, photography is light, and look at I just found that, just the emotion of that light coming through the bars made me realize that, I think the .5 ultra wide lens was best for this shot because it captured more light. And to me, it's more artistic, and I thought it was a good representation of what we're trying to do here today.
Yeah.
So normally I would probably take a 1x shot of this thing, but I will be definitely considering, the ultra wide a little bit more now if I can capture more leading lines, more light, and a little more emotion and kind of an artistic approach to the scene.
Yeah. Now, when you say more light, though, Dwight, you're not talking more light to the sensor. You're talking just more light and how it plays on the scene, right? Because
Correct.
you've got a
Correct.
lot more shadow play in the ultra wide shot. Because I think it needs to be said that the aperture on the main camera is bigger, wider than the aperture on any of the other cameras on the phone. So, just
Yeah, no, it's more of capturing the light and then the shadows.
yeah,
It just there was more behind me than there was with the 1x lens, and I was really happy with that shot. I just think it's a good illustration of what we're trying to do here today.
yeah, and of course there's the obvious that the ultra wide shows more of the scene, right? You got a wider angle of view, angle of view, I guess you could say. And so, what about
And look at the lead, and it captured more leading lines
yeah,
into the subject, right?
right,
So you've got the kind of the planner or whatever that is on the right, and then you've got all the bars bringing everything into the subject along with the light
yeah,
and the nice light flare as well.
right. And I was going to mention distortion,
Well, I was
but
going
I
to
think
ask
that
real
might
quick.
be better for your next image. But go ahead, Dave.
I was going to ask, you took these from standing from the same location, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point too. Is so what the different focal lengths. So the focal lengths, the ultra wide on the right, the focal length equivalent to a like a 35 millimeter camera is 13 millimeters. The actual focal length, if you look at the data in the image, it's 2.23. I can't
2
see.
millimeters.
2.22 millimeters.
Yeah.
So that's the actual physical focal length of the lens. Apple doesn't market them at these values, even though that's what they actually are. That's just what the data says. But what they do is they market them to the focal length equivalent to a traditional 35 millimeter camera, which is
That's a good
basically the
point.
standard for focal lengths. And so you got the 13 millimeter on the right and the 24 millimeter on the left. And so that's why you're going to see a difference. Like if you know anything about photography, you know that the smaller the number in focal length, the wider the view, and the larger the number, the narrower the view, type of thing. So, but I think it's just interesting that now it looks to me like the ultra wide is showing like warmer colors. Is that could that have anything to do with the way the sun breaks through the jail cell?
I think it's inherent in the lens itself somehow because I didn't do any temperature adjustments or anything like that
Right.
to this photo. And then when we look at my second one, maybe we'll see the same thing. It'd be good to compare that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go to that right now then.
Okay.
And
I think we just answered our question.
yeah, I think so. It's kind of
So I have these flipped. What were you going to say, Greg?
Well, I was going to say that it could have something to do with the aperture. With the wider aperture in the main camera, it's letting more light in, and I think it's going to behave differently on the sensor somehow that way. I don't know. I could be wrong, but
Maybe the more light coming in is making it lighter.
Possibly,
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't know the technical answer to that.
Yeah, that could be. But
Yeah, so I'm sorry?
I was just gonna say, but this time, yeah, your ultra wide is on the left and your main fusion camera is on the right.
That's correct. I could not figure out how to get those things flipped, but, I guess as long as I explain it. But, yeah, I mean, in this case, I think it's a decent close-up shot, if you will, of this Adobe in San Juan Capistrano, which incidentally was the first property, I believe, in California to be owned by a woman. So I really I'm really it's just kind of a nice old place. I just like going here. Anyway, the 1X I thought was fine. You can see this building is not very straight, and, it's kinda leaning all over the place, but it's an Adobe. But in this case, I've got the leading line coming up, from the end of the patio there, kind of then the perspective of the roof going back, kind of a 2-point perspective to the back, which kinda draws you in, and I was fine with that, and I'll be honest with you guys that I would normally walk away from that shot thinking I got a pretty good shot, but for the exercise for this particular podcast, I said, "Okay, well, let's go to the point 0.5 now, the ultra wide," and it pulled me, into this, well, pushed me, I guess, but
Mhm.
what happened here was I got another set of leading lines of the rocks in the foreground. I maintained the leading lines of the patio. I introduced more sky, and if you look at the clouds, they're coming, kinda down into the adobe as well, so I've got, additional leading lines down into the subject here, brought more trees in. So I think, from a compositional perspective, this made it a lot more interesting. So I guess, when we look at my examples here and what I've learned so far, in this exercise for this podcast is that I'm going to start using my point 0.5 more. And I'm going to start, not only taking the 1X because I know it's a better lens. I'm going to go ahead and take the shots with the other lenses and see what I can come up with.
Mhm. Da
The way I think. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Dave, any thoughts? You're already gonna go.
Yeah,
That's
well,
good.
yeah, okay. One advantage you have right now is you have great lighting conditions.
Mhm.
Because if your lighting conditions are subpar, that point 0.5 will look like crap.
Yeah.
So the other thing I notice is the roof, and this is true. Anytime you go uh, zoomed out, like a point 0.5 versus a 1, you're going to have you're going to have more depth feel, whether the depth
Sure.
exists or not. So the roof looks so much longer
Mhm.
here, even though you're really not showing a lot more length of roof. I mean, you have the 3 posts on both photos.
Mhm.
You're a little bit further down on the point 0.5 shot, but it isn't like you're showing twice as much roof, but it
Right.
just has that longer kind of stretched out feel to it.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
the other thing we have to remember is we're not just changing lenses, we're changing sensors.
Mhm.
Yes.
So that's why, Greg, you were mentioning the earlier photo about the warmness.
Mhm.
That could be partially the lens, partially the lighting, but partially the sensor.
Yeah, yeah, that is quite possible.
Because I know Apple does a great job with matching the sensors and matching everything. So it's really hard to notice especially if you do video, you zoom between the lenses.
Yeah.
That it's really hard to tell that, oh, this was taken by the wide, this is taken by the this was taken by the telephoto. But there's still a difference in terms of physics, in terms of, size of the sensor and how much light comes in and the bending of light. So
Yeah.
I would say the ultra wide here is a warmer, and I think that's partially because you got a lot more sun, but the wall itself has a golden hue to it, where the 1X, it gives you that kind of stark white feel to it.
And I think the white balance, the shift in the white balance could very much have a lot to do with the fact that the ultra wide has more green in the frame than the main one does.
Mhm.
So I mean, the camera is going to try to get that white balance adjusted to suit what it sees in the whole frame, right? The other thing I noticed is, oh, where'd Dwight go?
Hopefully he'll be back in a second.
Yeah, anyway, I'll just carry on here. But the other thing that I noticed is that there's more interesting foreground in the ultra wide. You're just able to capture more of that green on the side there, like I said, with the green. I think it's a little nicer framing with the trees, with the addition of the little bit of trees in the top left-hand corner. And so, the ultra wide gives you some options for composition over the main camera. And I think it's a good, to me, a good image, whether it's landscape or, and there he is.
Ta-da!
Sorry, guys, my internet conked out, and now I'm on my personal hotspot.
Interesting. Okay. I was just saying, Dwight, that the ultra wide offers a little more interesting composition because you have a little bit of a foreground with the addition of the more of the green foliage as well as the stones that as they bend around, and I think that's partially with the shift in the white balance. I think it's partially because of the different color in the scene as well. You've got more green and a little more sky, so it's going to shift that white balance to accommodate all that. And maybe that's part of the reason why it's warmer. I don't know. I could be wrong there.
Yeah, and that was the first thing that I noticed when I took the shot and I looked at it. And when I cropped for this, I'm like, hey, I've got a whole new set of leading lines here. And I'm big with having a foreground, midground, and a background. And as you mentioned, we achieved that here.
Yeah.
Dave, you mentioned something about, good lighting. That is my goal now. I'm really going to start paying attention to lighting, and I'm really going to start chasing lighting when it's good.
Yeah.
It's like fishing. You've got to put yourself there when the fish are there.
Yeah.
That's early in the morning, late in the evening. I think it's the same thing with photography.
Yeah. And
if
David
you don't have good light and you're shooting, if you're shooting at midday, you can improvise. There's things you can do, but there's nothing like that early morning light or that late evening night light. Now, I used to take a lot of sunset photos, and I noticed that the best color I got were with the telephoto lens. And the farther I would back out from that, like the 0.5 lens, the colors were way less saturated. So it has to probably do with something, kind of the color balance shift, like you're talking about, Greg.
Yeah. Yeah, and David in the chat says the foreground makes the image more interesting, and I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
I don't do enough to try to get a good foreground in my images, but I'm going to work on that. My emphasis in my own work has been on the light, like you talked about, Dwight. But now I've got to really start thinking about foreground elements and
foreground, midground, and background. Yeah, it draws the viewer in.
Yeah, for sure. So
now, if you look at my first, the 1X lens there, I've got a little bit of a green bush in there.
Yeah.
This one here.
Yeah.
And the 1X on the right, I've got a little bit of the green bush. Compositionally, I should probably just take that out. It's just a distraction. And on the other one, it works. So, but anyway.
But I would also say on the first picture, the foreground, the fact that, like you've talked about, the light coming through the bars and giving that shadow on the ground where you don't get that with the 1X, that adds a lot there.
Yeah. For sure. So Dave, you did a comparison of the main camera and the built-in telephoto camera on your phone,
which in my phone is the 5X,
right?
Which is an exceptionally long jump.
It is,
and that's something where when Apple went from having the 3X zoom to the 5X, I think they partially did it because Samsung had a 10X.
Yeah.
And they were getting bad, not necessarily the pictures were bad. I think they were getting bad reviews because people were doing things like, oh, here's a 10x photo, and you can actually read the sign on the 10x, where with the iPhone, once you go above 3, it's digital and it's all smudgy, which I would say very few people outside when you first get just to test limits say, "Hey, I'm going to use my camera to take a photo of a picture of a sign and see if I can read it or not." That's that far away.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might, but probably not. So that's why I think also, like, for the latest version you guys have, they brought it back to 4.
Right.
So it
Yeah.
isn't such, because you're going to be talking about the 2x optical quality zoom. So now everything's closer. The steps aren't as big.
Right. Yeah. So with these two images, I'm going to say you stood in the same spot for these ones?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is one I same shot, same position, one with the 1x, one with the 5x, and the 1x being on the left with the darker sky and the straighter lines coming behind us.
Mm-hmm.
And
it lets more color in, just as I was saying before on that 1X. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of amazing if you zoom, and you can't, I don't think you can do it here, but when I try to zoom in on the original photo to try to match the zoom to make zoom equal zoom,
Mm-hmm.
the curve doesn't seem as curvy on the
Right.
1x.
Yeah.
On the 5x on the right, that curve looks kind of like a severe turn, on the railroad tracks.
I see a derailment there.
Yeah, and it's really not that bad.
Yeah.
It's really not that bad. Yeah, it's so I mean, there is a curve to it, but it's not like you said. You never think, oh, how has this ever survived the last 80 years of being here, and not knocking stuff over. But also, when you do the zoom, you're zooming into where the trees are up there,
Mm-hmm.
and the bunch of trees straight ahead, and the trees add an additional, leading curve. I don't want to call it a leading line because it's not straight, but a leading curve that follows the train tracks.
And a good idea of the reach that you got here. It looks like a discarded tire on the left of your photo there, and then you can see it on the standard 1X on the left, so that it kind of gives you
Way
some
off in the distance.
perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So I kind of touched on it looking at Dwight's images there. I mentioned distortion, the word distortion. So I think the wider the lens, I think the more distortion gets introduced into the image. And I think this is kind of part of what I was talking about with in your 1X, Dave, the track goes way out and then makes that curve, and it's not so noticeable, whereas the 5X, you could see pretty much what it looks like. That's to me, that's closer to what it would look like in real life, I think. Whereas with the 1X, it's kind of distorting it because it's kind of going out, and the distortion's making it look like a sharper turn, if that makes any sense.
No, yeah. And I would say reality is kind of in between these two.
Probably, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of in between. Again, the trains, of course, go slow because you're around, they basically goes in the middle of a city. And this is freight trains. So there's no passenger service, unfortunately. Hasn't been for decades. But obviously they go slow because they have to cross multiple streets. But, and the other thing I noticed is that, and this may be also because of even though Apple, the telephoto I have was not upgraded like the newer telephotos, I think with the megapixels.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the 0.5 has 48 now.
Yeah. That the color saturation's a whole lot less. Now, whether that's because I know anytime you zoom in, you're letting in less light anyway. That physics. But you can see where and I did not touch I didn't do any editing on these photos at all. I just wanted to bring them as is. But how much darker the blue the sky is
Mhm.
and how much more contrast there seems between sky and clouds versus the 5X where the sky is a very light blue.
Yeah, I think we're talking about sensor here, right? It's not
Yeah.
taking all the information in that your 1X
Mhm.
did.
Yeah, because the 1X will be pixel binning. Like, if you took these as live photos,
I
the
did.
the 1X is pixel binning, which is basically creating bigger pixels because it has, 4 for
Mhm.
each one. That it's making 1 pixel out of 4, which is what binning is, and it's really gathering more light and information. So
Yeah, if you
yeah,
look at they're both pretty quick photos if you look at the speed at the bottom, but the 1X is 8 times as fast.
yeah. Yeah. And so you can see the difference in the aperture, right? The aperture
Mhm.
of the telephoto is f2.8, and then the aperture of the main camera is f1.78. So that's a significant difference.
Mhm.
And I mean, we're not we're not digging down into the technology of the images here because I mean, we've got the data to see what they are, but the
Right.
ISO on the main is 100 and the ISO on the telephoto is 64. It could simply be because of the field of view and what's captured in the scene
Mhm.
itself. That'll make a difference in the ISO and what it gives you for that. The only way around that is to select these manually through a different camera app. But
Yeah.
again, these are just to show the differences in the field of view and how these focal lengths play
Mhm.
a part on the image. So to just remind everybody that the main camera is a 24 millimeter focal length equivalent to 35 millimeter cameras, and the 5X on the 16 Pro Max is 120 millimeters. So, like you said, Dave, that's a pretty big jump. You could
Mhm.
say from 1X to 5X, but then when you think of the 24 millimeter to 120 millimeter, that is a big jump
Yeah.
in focal lengths. So Stephen Just has said, were these shot in ProRAW or straight to JPEG or HEIF? That may affect color. So since these were live photos, Dave, I suspect they're HEIF.
Yeah, these are all Heath, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the built-in camera, just because I don't if I wanna shoot something quickly that would, you know, be helped by a live photo, cat,
Yep.
I always default to that.
Yeah.
If I wanna do something other than that, I'll use a separate app.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can't be pro raw and live.
Right. Yeah. So now your second set of images, Dave.
Now, just like the whites, they're switched.
Yeah. And spoiler alert, mine do the same thing. So you've got your main camera on the right
Mhm.
and your telephoto on the left. And
Yeah.
I'm going to say again, you were standing in the same spot, were you?
Not in this case, no.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, so on the left, I took the photo from with the telephoto, and then I walked up to try to get the sides of the tree about the same, and then took it in the 1X. So, the main tree you see on the right on the 1X is the first tree you see on the telephoto on the right.
Oh, okay.
So, I basically walked a half a block
Yeah.
to get to actually try to make it similar in size. And it again, you can tell if you look at you have the kind of tree that isn't growing yet on the left, the stick, but right beyond that, there's a bush on the left photo.
Yeah. Okay.
That bush on the right photo is the one that I'm right next to.
Okay. I got you. Yep.
So I had
Right.
it was a lot. It was like I was walking a little bit, held up the camera like, no, it doesn't fill the lens. Keep walking. I was pretty close to the tree on the right before I got the size pretty equivalent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, you've introduced more leading lines into this thing, and it makes it more interesting, right? As opposed to the 1X where, yeah, the leading lines are the path and
Mhm.
maybe the tree line, but now you've got more of the street in view. you've got the tree line on the left, and you've got more sky. What's interesting, which one is your okay, yeah, your
Telephoto's on
1X.
the
See
left,
the
yeah.
yeah, so you see another illustration of more color in the 1X versus the, the tel
And the
yeah, the
weird
triple
thing,
camera.
and kind of weird thing with the telephoto, you can see if you look at if the path's going forward, because the telephoto compresses a photo front to back,
Mhm.
you can see there's a little bridge, or you can see there's a little structure. It's a little bridge over where water kind of ponds up,
Yeah, I
part
see
of the
that.
path. But if you look at it on the photo on the right, it looks way down there still.
Mhm.
And the distance between the trees are so much more spaced out on the 1X versus the 5X. Where the 5X, the trees look like they're compressed right together.
Yeah.
And if you look at the 1X, you can see there's a good amount of distance between the trees.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
so
like I said, it's I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
I want to say, so if you're thinking about, do I want to use the 1 or the 5, and you can, you know, move. Sometimes you can't move. Sometimes you need the 5X to actually get the subject large enough to see, and you can't get any closer.
Mhm.
But if you can get closer, that's something to keep in mind of that. Well, do I want my lines to look stretched out, or do I want my lines to look more compressed? And like Dwight was saying, how much beforehand do you want to see? Because the 5X, like Dwight said, you said, you can see there's a lot of the path kind of going even before you get to anything going on. Where the 1X, there's just a little bit of path. It's kind of abbreviated before you hit everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and the compression is really evident in these trees on the right, along the grass between the sidewalk or the path and the road. And, on the wide angle on the right, like the not the wide, the main camera on the
Mhm.
right, you could definitely see the space in between them as you get closer to that little bridge there. But on the telephoto, it looks like they're almost right next to each other.
Mhm.
And that's the compression that Dave mentioned. It compresses things, and it makes things look like they're closer together when they're really not. And that's a really big thing about long we like to call them long lenses, but because they go a long way. But telephoto lenses, that's the one of the really cool things about them is they can really compress images that way.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's it's
That
another interesting
Yeah.
comparison.
And that's also something to keep in mind when you see professional photographers who have the detachable lenses, and you're like, okay, I can get in that same position. Why doesn't my shot even look close to that? And especially, let's say, night shots when you have a full moon and the moon looks just massive. And there's a good chance they're using a 300 to 600 millimeter lens
Yeah.
that really compresses everything together. So you don't have like a city with the moon in the background. It doesn't really, kind of magnifies the moon, but it really shoves everything together. So it seems closer.
Yeah.
So everything seems closer together. So you get some of these shots where like the moon looks so, mammoth, like behind or around a cityscape, or, or mountains or something that you can't physically get unless you get, and I know they're coming out there because I've seen the ads, extra super zoom on your iPhone, which I'm kind of curious to see how that works on just because the if you look at the like the 600 millimeters lenses, first of all, they need support because they're that heavy.
Yeah.
But not only are they massive long, they're very big around because you have to let in a lot more light since you're zooming in so much. And there's only so much you can do on a phone
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
because the sensors are small, the lenses are small compared to even a 35 millimeter, let alone a full frame or, whatever else.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how focal lengths can you know, play a big role in how images look. And I think subject matter can really be the determining factor in as which camera you use. I don't think we really got too far into that just yet. But I mean, going back to Dwight's image of the Adobe, where it's an architectural structure, sometimes the wide or the ultra wide is the lens to use when doing like a tall building or something like that, because you're not going to get the whole thing in the frame unless you do use it. And it it distorts it. We've mentioned the word distortion a couple of times, but it distorts it. But really, it's not that much different than looking at it without a camera. Period. If you look up at a tall building, it's going to look smaller as it gets to the top, because it would be too freaky if it looked the same size all the way up. When you're especially if you're that close to it. So
you can straighten it a little bit more in post, but we're talking straight out of camera for this podcast. But I think you're right.
Yeah, for sure. So on that note of distortion, that's my primary reason for doing this series of images, which is it's just my truck. And so the left is the main camera, and the right I use the 2x quote unquote optical focal length, which is okay. So the main is 24 millimeter, and the 2x would be 48 millimeter. Obviously just 2 times the 24. So in traditional photography, a lot of people will use a 50 millimeter lens to try to get an image that looks similar to what the eye sees, is as far as as distortion or angle of view and that sort of thing. And it's a pretty common lens. When I had my Canon gear, I had a 50 millimeter lens. They called it the Nifty 50. And it was if I wanted to capture something and show what it looked like without being distorted, that would be the lens to use. So with the iPhone, I don't think it's any different. It's a 48 millimeter, so it's pretty close to 50. It's not. It's pretty darn close. But you can see in the main camera, with the left front corner of the truck looks really looks much bigger, and then it gets smaller as you go back to the back end of the truck. Whereas with the 2x with the 48 millimeter focal length, it looks normally what you would see, but standing there looking at it. So that's the distortion factor in these cameras. And because I use the same sensor, the one on the right with the 48, like with the 2x or the 48 millimeter, it is a little darker. Gosh, I was going to say
it's clearly not letting as much light in.
Yeah, because it's using the central 12 megapixels of the sensor, whereas the other one's using the whole sensor. And these were shot in, let me see real quick here. I think they were shot in, okay, here's the original. So it was shot in 48 megapixel, just in HEIF. I didn't use ProRAW or anything. And then the 24 millimeter or the 2x was obviously 12 megapixel. So the main camera image is using all the pixels and full resolution, whereas the second one's using just half, basically. And so I think it's a matter of how much light is getting to the sensor. And you're obviously using a very small, well, not a very small, but you're using half the sensor in the central part on the 48, on the 2x. I'll call it 2x. It's
right.
Getting confusing, going millimeters here. So on the 2x, you're using half the pixel sizes and all that stuff. I mean, it's no wonder that it's darker. I mean, I took the first one, and then I stepped back and I took the second one. So, I don't think there's any difference in the sun, the way it changed. It was only seconds apart. So, but the biggest thing I wanted to illustrate here was how the wide distorts compared to the 2x. And with a vehicle, you really see that change in distortion.
Now, the thing is, you may want that distortion sometimes. We're not saying
Yes.
the
Oh, yeah.
distortion's a bad thing.
Right.
We're
Yeah.
just saying, no, it exists. Like, if
Mhm.
you really want to have a very long shot of a vehicle that really shows off the length and gives you that extra leading line,
Mhm.
that's great.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Where the 2X won't give you that. It'll give you kind of a stubbier look.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely artistic reasons, to use one or the other. And with a wider angle, like the main you might as well, it is like a wide angle because it's wider than the 50 millimeter regular focal length would be. And then, I mean, to go take it even further, the ultra wide, the further out you get from the center, the more distortion you have. And you can see that in, well, like in Dwight's first image with the shadows coming through the cell. The shadows got longer as they got closer to the camera, closer to the bottom of the frame on the ultra wide shot. So yeah, and I think with these images of my truck here, I mean, look at the cracks on the road on the left image. You'd actually see them, whereas on the image on the right, because of compression and it's not so stretched out, you could hardly see those cracks on the road that run right along the side of the truck. So
Plus, you said you had to walk back.
yes, I
So
did.
your angle on those tracks is much
Yeah,
more acute.
yeah. And
So
the other reason I walked back too is to try to get the truck to be the same size in the frame. So like from the very left edge to the front bumper and the very right edge to the right bumper, I tried to make those the same as best I could.
Yeah.
These are uncropped, untouched, nothing's done to these. So I wanted to see, I wanted to illustrate the difference between, when you want to get something the same size in the frame, what the focal length does to it.
Now, one thing I also wanted to add, Greg, is this is why a lot of people say use the 2X lens or 2X zoom for portrait modes.
Yeah.
Because if you use the 1X, not only do, let's say, the truck looks elongated, your nose will look elongated from your ears.
Yes.
So your face will look narrower and pointier than it actually is.
Yeah. Yeah. If you want to see that, take a picture of a pet, like or a person or whatever, with the ultra wide. Get really close, and you'll see how big the nose is, and then how small everything else gets as it goes back. I've done it before, and it's a lot of fun to do that with pets and kids or whatever, and it really shows you how these things play on distortion and field of view and everything else.
Yeah, one comment I have is I don't want people looking at this getting discouraged from using the 2X because of the, lack of light and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think iPhone photos were made to be edited, right? Because of the sensor size, and you've got a smaller sensor here. So you may have to lift those shadows and do a few things to make it look like the photo on the left. You can give more saturation to the sky, change the hue, you can lift the shadows and maybe get something very close to the left side. So
yeah,
when I learned iPhone photography originally, all iPhone shots needed to be edited. So
yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people that just point and shoot and they're happy with that. But
yeah,
and that's fine. That is more than fine. But I think as you go through your journey of iPhone photography, you'll find that once you start editing, you'll like the results that you get. And normally I would certainly edit this image on the right to probably get it to look a little more like the one on the left as far as, brightness and stuff like that goes. So, okay. And then our last comparison is, now I did what Dave did here. And now this is the 4 times, and then I jumped it to the 8 times on the 17 Pro. So the 4 times is on the right, and that is a 100 millimeter focal length or focal length equivalent. And then the 8 times is obviously a 200 millimeter focal length equivalent. And what I did was, when I took the I took the one on the right first. So I took the 4 times shot of this tree, and there's a sign there, and then the, brick pillars and stuff like that in the background. And what I wanted to do here is illustrate this compression that we've been talking about. So I stepped back to take the 8 times shot, and I tried to get the tree to be about the same size, kind of like what you did, Dave. And then I just wanted to show this compression. So in the one on the right, in the 4X on the right, you can see how far away that sign is from the tree. It goes right across the sidewalk, and then it's over there. And then in the 8 times shot, it looks like it's much closer to the tree. So this is that compression that we were talking about. And I mean, so the telephoto is the most obvious thing about the telephoto is it gets your subject closer to you without having to move up. But
What's interesting on this, Greg, when you took the 4X shot, did you walk backwards in a straight line? Because what I'm seeing is compression not only in one axis, I'm seeing compression in another axis from an angle as well.
Yeah, I tried to go as straight as I could. There was cars on the parked cars that I had to make sure I didn't walk into. So I think I might have shifted off to the side just a wee bit, but I tried not to. I tried to go as straight back as I could.
I think the compression really is in one axis, though, right? It's not gonna pull
For the
in from
most
the
part,
sides
yeah.
in theory. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think if there's anything lateral, it's just going to be, not so much compression, but just position, I guess, of whatever's in the scene. But
well, that's one thing I noticed is that I don't know if it's a gate or the red brick part that looks like it's right on the right shot, right behind the placard.
Yep.
Is hidden by the tree in the left shot.
Yeah. So I think I might have had to shift to the left a bit.
But
to
the tree itself, but that would make sense. But the tree itself, including the roots, they look like they're in around approximately the same position.
Yeah. I like I say, I tried to line it up perfectly, and I think if I could, it looks like I could have gone back maybe a little bit more to make the trunk itself maybe the same size, because the one on the left looks a little bigger yet. But it's a tricky exercise.
I think you were focusing more on the tree than the background elements, right? You were trying to keep the tree in the same part of the frame, and that still allowed you to shift either this way or that way.
Yeah.
I think that's probably what occurred.
And the thing too is the longer the telephoto lens, so the longer the range that it gets, the narrower. I think it does. I think, Dwight, you're onto something about the sideways compression. I think it does compress things in sideways a little bit, because if you look at,
would make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. If you look at
because it would have to do it like it would have to do the whole thing like you're in a tube.
Yeah. It's like, like the ultra wide really takes things out, right? Whereas the telephoto is going to bring everything into the center. So like if you look at the placard, even if I did, sidestep a wee bit, I don't think I did it that much, not enough to totally hide the pillar in behind the tree. That's just the nature of the lens, compressing everything in.
The angle of the placard is the same on both sides, but it's almost like a reverse fisheye or something that occurred here.
Yeah. It's a real interesting exercise in focal lengths, like, everything that we've done here tonight, showing, what kind of elements that are included or excluded, depending on which way you go on your 2 cameras. And, so something to note too is about the data. If you're looking at the metadata at the bottom of the screen, you're going to see that on these ones here, it says 16 millimeter and f2.8 on both of these images. Well, that's because 16 millimeter will be the actual physical focal length of the camera that we discussed earlier, but it's actually 100 and 200. But the reason they read the same is because it's the same camera. It's just doing like what did they call it? 8 times optical quality zoom.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
think the overall message here, gents, is try all your lenses.
Yeah.
No, I was
Yeah.
stuck on that 1X forever. Try them all because
Mhm.
you may really find that it's just you might be missing something and you might be gaining something. It's very interesting.
yeah, for sure. So what we have now for everybody, for the listeners and people watching on YouTube, is a little challenge, and it's called the One Camera Challenge. So we would like to challenge you guys to pick one of the cameras on your phone. So if you have like a non-pro phone, you've got the ultra wide and then the main, or if you got the pro camera, a pro phone, you've got the 3 different cameras. And don't like on the main camera, you've got the 1X and the 2X at least, right? There's other ones. There's other ones that we didn't talk about that the pro phones have, and that's the 1.3, the 1.5. I mean, we could go on for hours about all these different focal lengths, but we just, trying to keep it as simple as we can for the sake of just, illustrating our points here tonight. But we would like to see you pick one camera and shoot with that one camera for the whole day and see what you come up with. And I think what you'll find is it'll train your eye to see in that focal length. And I know since I've been shooting with an iPhone only for the last almost 10 years here, I could almost look at something and see what it's going to look like through my iPhone camera lens. And once I got the 15 Pro or Pro Max, I started, because I was really enamored with the telephoto on that phone, I was starting to see how things were going to look through that camera because I used it so much. But prior to that, I was really able to visualize what a scene would look like if taken through the 1X because I used it a lot. And if you use just one camera for the whole day, I mean, hey, you could stretch it out and go for the whole week if you like, but just use one camera for a whole day in anything that you photograph, and then, put some of your best or favorite results in the Facebook group if you're on Facebook, and we'd love to see them. If we get some that we like, and we'll maybe talk about one or two of them on the next show. So, that's your homework, your homework assignment, and I think the 3 of us should take part. Why not? We'll just pick one camera in our phone, and we'll just use that for a day and see what we get. And I think it'll be a really good exercise to learn more about these focal lengths and how they have a play in your photography. So, all right. So before we finish up, I want to mention one last thing, and that is John Gill worked with Jack Hollingsworth on a masterclass. They did this for Moment, and Moment was selling this masterclass at one time. But now, after however many years it's been since they've done this, it's not all that long ago because I think Jack was using a 13 Pro Max at the time. These are now available. There's 10 videos, and the first 5 or so are available on YouTube. So we're going to put a link in the show notes to John Gill's YouTube channel. And I really encourage you to watch these because they are so good. It is so cool to see Jack at work. I mean, he's taken over 1 million iPhone photos in his years of using an iPhone. And when you watch him work, you'll see exactly why he came up. He's been able to take 1 million pictures. He's always referred to himself as a hunter with a camera. And when you watch him at work, it's pretty cool. It's just really cool to watch, and you learn a lot. Now, the content of these videos can translate into other photographers or other styles or other cameras, I meant to say. And so, I mean, Android cameras and a lot of this stuff, when he talks about like the emotion, the artistic and things like that, that can translate over to other types of cameras, not just the iPhone. So I think it's a really, really cool thing to watch, and I'm going to watch them all
And
again.
yeah, and it could be kind of the way you look at life and your surroundings and how you interpret them. And the he's hunting for light, right? And
Yeah.
that resonated with me along with his artistic approach. So I think I'm going to start episode 4 here, and they're quick. I think they're, 10, 12 minutes long, something like that each. Or I'm guessing I'm on number 4, but they weren't, extremely long. He's very, very good at getting his point across for each episode. So yeah, from an artistic and creative standpoint, I think they're definitely worth watching.
Yeah, and it was filmed in Cape Cod, a lot of it.
Mhm.
I think there was some I think might have been done in Cuba, I'm not sure. It's been a while since I've seen them, but I'm gonna be watching them all again. I would like to be able to binge watch them, so I'll probably I don't wanna start them tonight because 'cause I'll be up all night if I did, but, they're really good. They're really good. So check out the link in the show notes for John Gill's.
Well, I'm about to say, Greg, unlike two of us on this show, you don't have the "I have to go to work" excuse.
Uh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, but
We're working on it.
I do have to edit this show. So, anyway, thanks for everybody for watching in the YouTube live stream, and Steve and Just, who's just like not too far from me here, about a half-hour drive. Thanks for coming along, Steve, and
Mhm.
we appreciate everybody for watching and listening. And
Greg,
yep,
before the sign off, just because in the next 2 weeks, I will be taking a boatload of photos because of a couple events coming up before the next broadcast we have.
okay.
One, I will be going to the NFL draft this Friday.
Oh, neat.
It is in Pittsburgh. So I will be taking a ton of photos from down there, crowd photos. Basically, they're taking over a good hunk of downtown and the north side. And now they've been throwing around 750,000 visitors. That's over 3 days. So I'm
Yeah.
expecting 200 to 250,000 per day. Still, the city of Pittsburgh only has 300,000 people in it. So it's a significant increase. It's going to be crowded. But
Mhm.
so lots of photos from there. And of course, the first Sunday in May is coming up. And if you followed the show for a while, that's the Pittsburgh Half Marathon. So I will have tons of photos from on course that I'll be posting probably that day, assuming I'm in decent enough shape after the race to start editing photos.
All right. Well, cool.
Great. Have fun.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We look forward to seeing some, like, a ton of people photos from you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Alrighty. Okay. Well, so, all of our socials are in the show notes, so keep an eye on Dave's Instagram and whatnot for pictures that he's going to be taking over the next couple of weeks. And I guess on that note, great show, guys. I think it was a pretty
Mhm.
good topic, and I guess we'll see everybody in the next one.
Good night, everyone.
Have a great one, everyone.